Welcome into a special Inside Carolina stand-up outside of Boshamer Stadium, North Carolina 2025 Media Day today. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Grace Nugent. We're always sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Grace, today we heard from Coach Forbes and several players. I think there was an overall theme of depth and experience and leadership today. Your overall thoughts, what we heard from coach and players today?
Well, Tommy, this is a really experienced team. Touched on that specifically with this. He talked about the middle infield and that defensively up the middle, that's going to anchor this entire lineup. Jackson Vanderbrink is back. You're going to have Gavin Gallagher at third, Hunter Stokely at first. It's just going to be a lot of experience, and he really emphasized how that's really leading this team.
Yeah, what I asked a few questions about was you lost a lot of experience of players that sort of just did their thing and led by example. Luke Stevenson, I think, is a guy that's going to be one that's going to be really vocal. Luke talked to us today. That video's up on Inside Carolina, but just a lot of good opportunities for young guys to step up, but also veterans like Stevenson now to have some leadership ability.
And Luke is a veteran as a sophomore, and he didn't play this fall. He got a really unique opportunity to sit next to Coach Gaines and call pitches and learn how this coaching staff specifically works with pitchers in different situations. And I think that's going to reflect really well coming into this season, especially in his second season. He's just going to have that much more confidence to lead and direct this staff, a staff that's going to have a lot of guys that are coming back from injury, Jake Knapp, Folger Boaz, and some new freshman arms and some new arms that are going to step up and take over the work that was done by Ben Peterson, Dalton Pence, and Matt Poston.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of the former players here working out ahead of their major or minor league assignments, but the one thing that I think we heard a lot, and I heard it from Jackson Vanderbrink, heard it from Coach Forbes, heard it from every player we talked to today, was Jake Knapp and his ability to come back from that devastating injury last year. He threw out here on the field yesterday for the first time, put in some good work. Forbes seems really excited about him being able to participate this fall.
And I know I talked to Jake earlier. He is so excited to be back, especially having what was going to be his senior season get cut short. And Jackson, Luke, even guys like Kane and Tyson who didn't see him last year are so excited that he is back. His rehab buddy Folger said when he took the mound yesterday, it was just something special because Jake has been supporting Folger through his journey. Folger's been supporting Jake through his journey. And I think Forbes is going to have a really awesome problem that he has three guys that can be Friday aces. He's going to have Jason DeCaro, he's going to have Jake Knapp, and he's going to have Folger Boaz. And figuring out where all those pieces fit together in accordance with the pitch counts and the rehab schedules is going to be really interesting to see in these first few weeks.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the problem that Coach Forbes is going to have. He's got DeCaro obviously threw a ton on Friday. Knapp is a Friday guy. Folger Boaz working his way back as well. You're going to have guys, and I thought this was an interesting take, and you're big on the pitching staff as well as everybody in the building here. He's going to have guys that may have started a lot last year that don't start this year, that come out of the pen. Jake Knapp could be one of those guys. But your overall thoughts on what you heard about the pitching staffs, obviously deep. Obviously they're going to have 14, 15, 16 arms to choose from. Forbes likes to get it down to 8 to 10 during the season. Your thoughts?
I think he's going to get it down to 8 to 10 during the season, and he has a lot of veterans, and there's a lot of people that he's been talking about, specifically Kyle Percival, Cam Padgett, that are just stepping it up in that junior season. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's getting to a point where he can't find someone that'll consistently throw strikes, that he moves Jake Knapp to be a closer. And I don't want to give him too much excitement too early, but I think if this pitching staff performs to the best of its abilities, it can be one of the best pitching staff, if not the best staff in the ACC, and compete up there nationally because they have those three guys that could be Friday guys. And then there's a lot of guys in that bullpen. I'm looking at Aiden Houck coming out of that bullpen. I think his stuff, when you use him as a middle reliever, is electric, and his stuff is ticking up. And Manny Matias is obviously going to be targeted right now as that closer role, but I think he could also kind of do what Dalton did last year as like the Band-Aid guy. When it's bad, this is the guy that you put in. And obviously there's some things that all of those guys need to work on. Aiden had a problem with walking batters, and Matty near the end of the season, his velocity was kind of down. And then Forbes is going to have to figure out where guys like Kyle Percival come in and Cam Paget. And he's talked about Olin Johnson getting better. And then you have these 3 freshmen, which I think people should start paying attention to these names, which is Walker McDuffie, Ryan Lynch, and Cameron Seagraves, that I think can also make a difference going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. A ton of arms to choose from. One thing North Carolina has to do is replace the outfield last year. D'Onofrio, Cook, and, of course, Vance Honeycutt. We heard from Tyson Bass today. He's going to be one of those fan favorites. I mean, a guy of not many words, country guy from Lucama. I mean, he comes in as a guy ready to play, sort of a plug and play in the outfield, but he's got some guys that'll be out there with him that sort of they won't make North Carolina fans forget the outfield of last year, but they certainly will be able to step up.
I think, looking at Basson specifically, he's going to say what's on his mind. That is a character right there. But the way he approaches, he was North Carolina Wesleyan's Vance Honeycutt. He broke their school home run record on his very last at bat there. And here, I think he's going to be able to translate a lot of those skills, even though it's a higher level of pitching. In the fall, he was hitting things off the bat 110, 116, and he fits into that right field very well. He has the speed. He and Kepley are going to be kind of the 2 guys that I think they really rely on the base paths as well. And like Forbes has said, he reminds him a lot of D'Onofrio, and I think that's going to happen. He's pretty light and unassuming in the box, but when he sees a pitch that he wants to hit, he's going full speed at it. And then obviously it's unfair to Kane to compare him to Vance. They're 2 very different players. They're 2 very different heights. They're both actually from Salisbury, which is pretty funny. But Kane told me that he's learning the outfield and he's learning how to gel with whoever else he is out there. And I don't think his range is going to be as big as Vance's, but he is still a dynamite lockdown center fielder. And I think if Forbes decides to use him as a leadoff guy, that's going to be really important too, because his OBP is so high. He's so good at drawing walks. He barely strikes out. And once he's on those bases, he has really good instinct there. And then I think the left field is where you see more of a question. Forbes has talked about Rom Kellis is the leading candidate, but he's saying leading candidate. And I think that Perry Hargett, who played a lot of the infield actually in the fall, he's now listed as an outfielder on the roster. I could see him sliding in there. They said Gavin is going to go to third base, but I think if you really, really need him, you could put him in left. Mac Dye is a catcher, but I mean, maybe they'll try to move some things around. You never know. He's just going to have to try to get those best 9 guys in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, he's got talented options, obviously. Tyson Bass is going to be one of those hitters that you remember. He has loud at-bats. Grace talked about the exit velocities all fall. I mean, it's ridiculous for a guy like that. He's going to hit a lot of balls out of Boshemer Stadium. One thing that I think is going to be a key is how Luke Stevenson plays. We talked about him earlier on the leadership side. He had opportunity to watch in the fall. Luke is a guy, you see him projected first-round catcher, one of the first catchers to go off the board in Major League Draft next year, or later this year. But his ability to manage this pitching staff and that ability he had to watch in the fall, to sit beside Coach Gaines, to do all that, I just think that pays huge dividends, not just for his game, but for Carolina.
I think so too. I think he's going to be a linchpin both offensively and defensively. They lost a lot of power. The team broke the record last year with 115 home runs. That's not happening again this year, but Luke is going to be one of those guys that Forbes also needs to bring it consistently at the plate. And I think his whole thing is going to be consistency. Can he consistently manage this pitching staff? And this year, it's also unique because they have another young catcher in McCadden Dye who caught for Liberty last year. And so Forbes will have the opportunity to rest Luke from behind the dish in some of those maybe midweek games, those Sunday games, which I think is going to be so important because he caught almost every single inning last year. And you can still keep his bat in the lineup if you put him at DH. And from what I've heard, Mac is also not he's not really that big of a drop-off defensively. Obviously, he's not Luke, but he's another really good option. So I think keeping Luke healthy and making sure he's in a spot to help manage that staff wherever he is on the field is going to be paramount.
Yeah, I think what's important is we talked about the depth out the gate. North Carolina has 2 guys at every position. You have multiple pitchers. It can go on any day of the week. Midweeks will be important as well because this schedule's tough. But you have guys that he can play One name that sort of surprised me, and I'll be honest, is Hunter Stokely at first base. I mean, Hunter's been around forever. He got hurt last year. He slotted in at first, so you're going to have veterans dotting the infield with Jackson Vandenbrake, obviously very excited to be at second base. Madera moves to his sort of natural position of shortstop, Gavin Gallagher. This infield, while it will look different, I think it's going to be an interesting watch here with Stokely. You got another left-handed bat. I mean, just so many options for Coach Forbes.
Yeah, and they're old.
Yes.
I don't think you should kind of negate that. And Gavin isn't old, but he's had a lot of lived baseball experience. And Stokely watched all of last year, and I remember 2 years ago, he hit this like monster walk-off against Miami. I think he's going to try to return to that form. And Parks Harbor did fantastic last year, but Hunter Stokely is a way better first baseman. You're basically the gold glove of college baseball. He has a gold glove caliber first base glove. And I think that's really going to show up, especially where Gavin has spent a lot of time at third, but it still might be a little bit of those kind of adjustment chafing when he gets right back in there. And so having Hunter, who's old, who's experienced, who's a lefty bat at first is going to be really important. And it's also really important from the leadership side. I mean, that middle infield with Jackson and Alex is anchored by two of the guys that are the biggest leaders on the team, as Forbes has said. And then you have Luke behind the dish, and you have Jake in the pen and with the staff. It's just, he has a lot of leaders on this team and a lot of people who are trying to lift everyone up. And I think that they need that if they want to try to get back to Omaha.
And they're going to need it because Texas Tech on Valentine's weekend starts February 14th. Of course, Mike Fox being inducted to the Hall of Fame on the 13th, I believe. Coach Forbes will attend that and then get back for the Texas Tech series. This schedule last year, I think they left the state of North Carolina twice last year. This year, not so much. They do play Duke and State. What do you think about loading up with Texas Tech right out of the gate? No disrespect to the other teams that they've played opening the season, but Texas Tech is a legitimate College World Series contender at times. They come to the Bosch here in 2 weeks.
I think it is the perfect way to start off the season because Forbes is immediately telling his team, here are the tough competitors you're going to face. You're not entitled to any beginning of the season wins. You might not keep that consecutive home winning streak up. He's telling them that this is what you're going to face the rest of the season. And I think bringing Texas Tech in is such a good idea. And I've always kind of been an advocate of, I want them to go play some of those big tournaments that they do in Texas and Las Vegas, because then you see a lot of big caliber teams. And yes, you may lose and it may hurt your RPI, but I think for your team, that is one of the best things you can do to give them adversity and some tough games at the beginning. I know people say build confidence, but that's what they've had all preseason. They've had all fall. Now it's time for them to really kind of lock in and play some of those tough opponents. And this ACC slate is no joke. Their first ACC series is Stanford. And Stanford has Japanese phenom Rintaro Sasaki, and they have Joey Volchko, and they have Matt Scott, and they have a talented bullpen and a talented lineup. And then you don't get any breaks, even though you're playing your three of your biggest rivals at home. You don't get any breaks with Wake Forest, Duke, and NC State. It's going to be a tough schedule, so I think starting with Texas Tech starts them off on the right foot.
Yeah, that'll do it for Media Day. UNC baseball officially underway. First pitch a couple weeks ago. Media Day today. 2 more weeks, Carolina and Texas Tech right here in Bosch-Hummer Stadium. That's Grace Nugent. I'm Tommy Ashley. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina for plenty of more coverage of the Diamond Hills.